Commission meeting, and we're going to start off with going to call the meeting to order and now do our invocation and pledges. Commissioner Randall is going to lead us in our invocation this evening.
Pray with me, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this wonderful day we've had, Lord, and all that you've blessed us with. And pray you continue to look over us and be with us this evening as we make decisions on behalf of the city of Aztec and help us to do the best we can. And this time of year, we like to recognize and thank you so much for all those who have sacrificed so much for our country, Lord, and live in this great place. And just thank you so much for blessing us and this great nation. Continue to look over us, be with us, and bless us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico and is a symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
Somebody tall has been here.
Okay, Carla, would you please call the roll? Here.
Here. Here.
Here. Here. Okay, so let's see. Next is agenda approval. If there are any items that do not meet the approval for being heard on this evening's agenda, now is the time to remove these items. We are removing
Item A,
item,
under the quasi-judicial hearing.
I'm sorry, yeah, under number 11, quasi-judicial hearings, we are removing item A, the oil and gas 19-02 recompletion hydraulic fracturing of the Brewington Gas Com C, number 1R gas well. Okay. Anything else? So I would entertain a motion to accept this evening's agenda with the exception of the removal of item A under number 11.
Mayor, I move to approve this evening's agenda with the exception of item A under quasi-judicial hearings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Let's see. Next up is our consent agenda. Items placed on the consent agenda will be voted upon with one motion. If any item proposed does not meet the approval of all commissioners, a commissioner may request that the item be heard under items from consent agenda. Does anybody have any questions? I want to pull item F, the Aztec Roping Association agreement, and discuss it briefly. But other than that, does anybody have anything they would like to pull?
No, that's fine.
Okay. All right, so I'd entertain a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda with the exception of item F.
Mr. Mayor,
Sir.
I vote we approve the consent agenda with removal of item F to be discussed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. So item F is the Aztec Roping Association agreement. And I don't know if anybody can kind of speak to this at all. Okay.
Jeff's a roper.
This is probably gonna, I don't know. I'm just gonna go for it and say what's on my mind. Can you explain to me, and I'm not, I don't know that much about this type of stuff, just what I've, seen on TV and, that kind of thing. I don't have a lot of knowledge of it, just very basic layman's type of knowledge about roping competitions and things like that. So if you could explain what they do, when they're doing the competitions and maybe how we fit into this as a city and things like that.
I think the first thing we have to discuss is the history of the roping arena. The roping arena has been there since the 60s. It was actually the first feature that went into Riverside Park, I believe before the city took over that and began managing it as a park. So it has a long-term history. Their association is strong. They have a waiting list currently, I think a year long or so for people to get on. So that's where our involvement stems from, is the fact that we basically built the park around the roping arena. As far as the events themselves, I'm not a roper. So, but what I've seen is, of course, they bring in the dogies and they corral them down there on the north end. And then they have the riders and they have chutes that they run the dogies out, and then they ride out into the middle of the arena and
Yeah.
take them down.
Super, like, bring it down even another level of layman's
So they
terms.
have calves.
I mean, I've heard the song, "Get along, little doggies," but
Little tiny
now I know what that
calves.
means.
They are not dogs.
Yeah.
Calves, they're little calves,
Right.
right? And then they run them out of a chute, and then they have a slight delay before on horseback.
So it's
they've
like
got-
stuff you see on TV, the rodeo stuff.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly,
Okay.
yeah. And then they run down, and either in teams or individuals, they rope the calf, they jump off the horse. The horse is trained to hold the calf in place. They
Right.
go down, and then they tie the feet. They're timed on and judged on their technique. Again, what I understand of it, I've never
Right,
done it.
right, right.
I've just watched.
I mean, and I'm not trying to be overly bleeding heart here, but, they're just basically jumping on these guys, on these calves, and they're ripping, wrestling them to the ground, and they're tying their feet up, as kind of a sport of sort.
I'm not in a position to defend what they do or don't do. I mean, it is a long-term tradition in our country.
Right,
And
right.
it's-
I don't doubt that. I mean,
It's a practical event that is still used today on the ranches.
Right.
All throughout the county here, statewide. So it's just, going back to American history, back when they got together to relax a little bit on their weekend or whatever, just to practice their skills, compete, and have a good time.
I'm sure the
Which
calves are
continues
like,
today.
yeah, cool.
Well, and they're
let's
not
go.
jumping on the
Let's go
calves.
practice.
They rope the calf, and then they do throw it down on the ground and tie the feet together, but it's not like, well, they rope the team roping, they rope the head and the heel, and then, but,
Again, I'm not an expert.
Yeah,
on
I
it.
understand your position,
But they-
Jeff.
What I
I
can speak to,
appreciate it.
though, is our relationship with
Right.
the roping club has been long-term. They are one of the easiest of our groups to deal with because they're extremely self-sufficient. They've managed themselves.
Yeah, and my issue isn't necessarily that the group or anybody is operating with any kind of malintent, I guess I personally have a little hang up with that still being considered kind of a sport sort of thing. I mean, I get it. I guess I just don't get it, you know what I mean? If that makes any sense.
national, we had the national high school rodeo finals here several years.
No,
and
yeah.
had, I mean, it's a part of the West, and
Well, then,
and they
you know,
they do some barrel racing down there,
Yeah,
I
I believe
believe,
they do
and
barrel racing.
they, for the kids, and they do.
There are events,
Barrels and poles
again,
and all
we're
that.
talking
All
about
kinds of things.
dollars to the community because it is, something that has been here for years. It does have a particular draw.
Right.
I'm not sure if hotel rooms are sold, but definitely fuel and food and stuff like that are all part of that issue.
And it's not just in the West, they do it all over the United States.
The humane nature of it, I can't speak to.
And that's, I mean, and I understand. I understand your perspective, and I understand the other comments. I get it. I just, I guess I just have a differing point of view, that's all. So, that's why we're talking about it. Chief, I don't know if you had some expert testimony to add,
I've been
or?
down there and watched it
Yeah.
a few times, and rather than the calves, every time I've been down there, they've been doing heading and heeling, where they have two riders there.
Team roping.
and the
Team
steer
roping.
goes out, one goes out and ropes the head, and then the other one goes and ropes the
The
back
heel.
feet. And then as soon as they get the feet, then they let them go, they don't even take them to the ground. So every time I've been down there, that's what they've been doing, is
The team
heading and
roping.
heeling.
Right,
Team roping.
okay. That's the only question or / concern that I had about it. Not really the operation or the execution of the contract itself. It's just kind of the sport, or whatever you want to call it, the activity itself. I don't know, I know I wouldn't want to be chased out in a big dirt circle and have some dude throw a rope around me and wrestle me to the ground, and then,
We could
for
arrange that.
fun. I'm sure there's quite a few people maybe here tonight that might want to see that happen. But, luckily, I don't have to, I have a choice in that not happening, and these, some of these other, animals don't have a say in it, I guess, so. Anyway, that's all I have for you, Mr. Blackburn. Does anybody else have anything? With that, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to move to approve the Aztec Roping Club Roping Arena Operation Agreement.
Second.
Do we do that by voice or by? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm opposed. I vote against for that reason. All right. Passes. Thank you. Okay. Do we have, I think I saw one person, we're at citizens input. I think I saw at least one person on the list. Is there anybody that signed up for citizens input? Thank you. Mr. Farnsworth, 424 Parkland Drive, topic sidewalks. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Dustin Farnsworth. I am a resident of Aztec. I come to you this evening to talk with you about the state of the sidewalks on Parkland Drive. As you know, we have a large number of elderly citizens on our street, and our sidewalks were, I believe, installed, most of them in 1960s, and they are all original to 1960. Just yesterday, our 85-year-old neighbor tripped and was sent to the hospital because of the state of the sidewalks. And so we've talked to the city. They've come out and they said, yeah, they need replaced. We'll put you on the list. But outside of that, we can't get any answers. We can't get what the scope of what they're going to do. We can't get any time frame. We can't get anything. And I'd like some assistance in getting with the Public Works Department and getting somebody to communicate back with us what our time frame is and what their scope of what they're going to do for the sidewalks.
I'll make that happen.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is all we had for citizens input this evening. We are ready to move into business items. Item A, excuse me, intent to adopt ordinance 2019-493, cell phone use. I guess I'll take this one because I kind of spearheaded it, I guess. I've been talking to the city manager, I don't know, a few months on and off, about us adopting an ordinance in the city of Aztec that will cover cell phone use. I mean, I would be willing to bet that most, if not every single one of us, own a cell phone. And I would also be willing to bet that most, if not every single one of us, at least once in their life, have caught themselves using the phone in their car when they shouldn't be. I'm guilty of it. Just like, you know we're not supposed to speed, but we still probably do it sometimes. And I know that things like this are not foolproof. We're not going to completely eliminate cell phone use in motor vehicles, but I ride bikes. You see kids on sidewalks. I see far too many as a high school teacher. The kids don't even wait until they're out of the parking lot of the school to start texting their friends while they're driving 3,000 or 4,000 pound vehicles down the road at 40 or 50 miles an hour. And they're distracted. And someone's going to get killed. I can't believe somebody hasn't been killed yet. And I think that this just kind of brings us in line with a lot of other, not with all cities, but a lot of cities are trending this way. And I think that we need to kind of get on that wagon as well and start, to codify it and to make it, a violation of city ordinance. And if you get caught playing on your phone when you're driving, holding it, talking to your friends or your coworkers or whomever, your family members, or especially if you're texting, which is already currently in city code, that you get a fine for it. Now, are you going to do it and get away with it sometimes? Absolutely. And this isn't, expected to be a fail-safe and to completely eliminate it. But I know personally, if I've gotten a speeding ticket, at least for a while, afterward, I'm a little more mindful of how I'm driving and the way I'm, speeding and minding the speed limits, et cetera, et cetera. And I think this is more just kind of a preventative and a deterrent than a cure-all. But I think it's time that we kind of get into the 21st century on this kind of stuff. Because a lot of these traffic ordinances and moving violations and things like that were formulated before the age of where everybody had a smartphone attached to their ear 24/7. So I just think it's time to kind of get with the times, and it's a public safety issue, and I'd hate for somebody to get hurt or worse yet get killed because somebody's distracted playing with their phone. Just for that 1 second they look down to dial their phone or to see who's calling, and they veer, hit a kid, hit a dog, hit anybody, hit somebody's property for that matter. That's kind of where I am on that, and I will open it up to any kind of discussion or additional comments or questions or.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I was wondering, isn't there a state law already about not using a cell phone while you're driving? Am I mistaken there?
Only for texting.
Right.
Only for texting? Okay. Because people have asked me the same question. I said, I thought there was, but I'm not sure. So that does answer that.
So do we have any kind of data that says from just talking on your phone? I have mixed emotions about this one. Texting, I'm all for, not texting while you're driving, but with all the Bluetooth things.
No, and you're allowed to use hands-free.
I know,
Yeah.
but you still have to get that number, so, I know that it does allow the Bluetooth, but.
Right.
Well, I don't have the data. I know there's data out there. They talk about how cell phone affects you and you're driving. I don't have that with me, right?
I don't have it either, but in even using a hands-free device,
Well, you-
there's studies, and again, I can't cite specific studies, but I've just done some anecdotal reading on things over the years about this, because I am, as I used to ride bikes a lot more before I moved here, and I was convinced that that's how I was going to end up dying one day, is that somebody is going to inadvertently not pay attention. They're going to grab their phone, they're going to veer just a little bit and rear end me. And you got someone on a bicycle, doesn't matter if they have a helmet or not, they could have full body armor and they're still probably going to die or get their back broken or get injured badly, because of somebody just isn't paying attention. And if you remove that, with the threat or the specter of getting fined, about the same as a speeding ticket, then hopefully that'll start to change behaviors. It's going to take time. I mean, when I was a little kid, we didn't have to wear seatbelts, and then that became a thing, and it took time. It took time for our parents to start saying, put your seatbelt on. And now, I can't imagine getting into my car without putting my seatbelt on. It was a transition, and I think this will end up being a transition too, and I personally am not going to tell the chief how to do his job, but I can anticipate, maybe giving some folks a warning kind of thing, and say, look, this is a new ordinance. Next time we see you again, we're going to hit you. But that's the chief's, job and his responsibility. But I know there's data out there that does show that not just cell phone use, but distracted driving of any sort. But in our case, it's mainly cell phone use. Is a thing. Even with Bluetooth and hands-free stuff, you don't tend to be quite as sharp when you're driving if you're carrying on a conversation with your significant other or with your parents or something like that, talking about what you're going to do tomorrow. And you're not quite as sharp and paying attention to the road, but it eliminates at least a layer, I think, of distraction. And I think it's, I certainly don't think it's a bad thing. So, yes, ma'am.
Well, I think it's definitely a health and safety issue. I've been living as if it was against the law, so I was kind of surprised that it wasn't on the books. And and of course I lived through the era of people resisting seat belts because they didn't want the government telling them what to do, and it's just, we can't do it. I have often noticed we've got so many four-way stops in Aztec, and people stop at a four-way stop and they're talking, and you can tell they don't know if
They're not
they've got the
really
right of way
picking up
to
on
go. I
what's
see
around
that
them. Yeah.
constantly. So I know from my own experience and distraction that I think it's really important to make sure we cover this for the safety of our
And more
community.
vehicles have, newer vehicles have Bluetooth setups, and they have equipment so where you can operate really with your steering
Well,
wheel.
you
So,
can use it for an
yeah.
emergency.
Right.
Otherwise,
Um,
pull over
yeah, pull over.
and save yourself
So
and everybody
anyway,
else.
I understand, and I'm guilty of using my phone, even knowing that I'm not supposed to, and just like I'm guilty of speeding, and I think we all are, but we have to just, I think it's the right direction to head. So that's all I have. Anybody else have anything they want to add, or, and this is intent to adopt, it's not final adoption.
I was thinking that I've run into so many people on the highway be talking on their phone, and they're going 35 miles an hour on the 55-mile-an-hour zone. I'm thinking, if I came over a hill and they were there, I might have met them in a more
Right.
permanent fashion. So this kind of thing is definitely a health and safety issue, I think. And I'm surprised it wasn't on the books too, and I'm surprised it's not a state law.
Yeah, I didn't know it wasn't.
And if I'm not mistaken, Albuquerque's had this on the books for a while, if I'm not mistaken.
Bloomfield and
sure.
I
Farmington
think
do, too.
Bloomfield do as
Yeah.
well, so.
So it wouldn't be like we're standing outside on the cold by ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like most companies even, I mean, you're not allowed to operate a company vehicle
Right.
on
Yeah.
your phone. I mean, a lot of it, I mean, a lot of people do. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't ever, never. But no, it's something, and like what I got thinking, because I mean, I hate
That
adding
was
laws.
convincing.
I hate adding stuff like that, but at the same time, I know anytime I go into Bloomfield, I'm like, oh shoot, I'm in Bloomfield, and I need to make sure I'm not on my phone. It's like, well, it's not a bad thing to have people think, oh shoot, you're an ass, you need to be off your
Yeah.
phone, because it does help you watch. So I'm the same way. I never ever, I mean, texting and emailing while you're driving is just stupid, but on your phone, I don't know,
Yeah.
it'll help.
I always figure if it's not an emergency, they can leave a message.
Exactly.
And I remember not ever having cell phones long ago when the earth
Way
was
back
young.
then, way back.
Yeah, so, and seatbelts.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions or comments before we
So
move forward?
we also have the fees listed
Ah,
for the first, second, and third offense
Mm-hmm.
that will be incorporated into it as well. First offense is 105, second offense is 180, and third offense is $330, with the fines doubled in an active school zone.
Wow.
Boy,
That's pretty steep.
yeah.
it is.
And again, that'll hurt. And I know that if that happened to me, I would definitely change my behavior, because that's a pretty steep fine. Even the first one, $100 basically. So, all right, thank you, Steve, for adding that. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add or discuss on this business item?
I was curious if Chief had any input on it, other than, I was curious what your input was, or if you had any, on what you think about it, or why it hasn't been already in an ordinance.
Well, I really don't have a lot of input. This is one of those that had been brought up. There's certainly issues out there with people and driving. And what we use now would be a distracted driving. We have that ordinance that we can ride. It doesn't increase and it doesn't do the other. This one is specific to cell phone. I would have loved if we could have figured out how to make it where if they're holding it in their hand, it makes it easier for the officers. But we had some issues with that one and couldn't quite get to that part of it. But so this is probably better than what we had before. And I do know that distracted driving is a serious thing that goes on. And it's not just this. And so we have the other distracted driving so that we can take care of things. I have an adult story. I know someone that works over at the police department. She had an aunt and uncle, and they were driving, and someone was driving the other direction, dropped a CD on the floor, and reached down to pick up the CD, went across the line, hit them head on, and killed both of them, her aunt and uncle. So it doesn't take much to become distracted. I'm fortunate I have my phones Bluetooth to my hearing, so that I'm able to do that. I hit this button and then I don't have to pick up my phone. I think others are going to have to come up with ways of making their vehicles hands-free so that they can do it. I know if we go and pass this one, Bloomfield has it. I anticipate it won't be too far in the future where it may be illegal on a statewide basis. I think it's going that direction. Albuquerque is already hands-free, Santa Fe is hands-free, Bloomfield, there's probably some others I'm not thinking of right
Yeah,
now.
I'm sure.
Lots of
But
cruises.
it's really important that people pay attention to their driving so that we don't end up having these situations where someone can unfortunately be seriously hurt.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay, Commissioner Saib, you want to add anything else? I just want to,
No.
I think everybody else-
I'm- Like I said, I'm kind of torn on this one,
I understand.
but I understand the logistics behind it and everything, so.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and close it to discussion and entertain a motion for business item A.
Mayor Snower,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
move to approve the intent to adopt ordinance 2019-493, amending Chapter 24, traffic to include using a handheld mobile communication device as a violation, and Section 1-12 to include penalty and fees for such violation.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Carla, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Snover.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fry.
Aye.
Commissioner Sight.
Aye.
Commissioner Randall.
Aye.
Commissioner Lewis.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay. Thank you. And we are now at item 11, quasi judicial hearings. We pulled item A, so we're at item B, zone change 19-02, zone change request from R1 single family dwelling district to R2 multiple family dwelling district. Could I please have the list of folks that have signed up as interested parties and et cetera? So if I could, real quick, before I take this from Mr. Saavedra, is there anybody that is here for this zone change that has not signed up on this sheet that wishes to be heard in this hearing? Because I just want to be sure, because I don't want to get halfway through and have somebody say they didn't realize they had to sign up and then have to back up. So is everybody good? Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay. So I'm going to read through this script again, excuse me, and bear with me. So this is to be read at the beginning of land use hearings. The following hearing procedure is for all hearings on tonight's agenda. A land use hearing registration form is located on the clerk's table for those who wish to receive a copy of the results from this hearing. You must provide your full name and current mailing address in order to receive a copy of the land use hearing order. If you wish to testify and provide comment on the matter at issue, you must register with the clerk on the land use hearing registration form, which is this, and be sworn in with staff, the applicant, identified parties, witnesses, and interested persons that are identified by the parties and/or interested persons wishing to testify, as indicated on the land use hearing registration form. The chair will then move into the land use hearing part of the meeting. And there is a series of questions regarding challenges to the jurisdiction of the city of Aztec, any conflicts or personal biases, any ex parte contacts regarding upcoming matters. And then the staff, applicants, and parties identified by commission, all witnesses, and any interested persons wishing to testify regarding the zone change. We will go through and swear you in. And then the order of presentations is staff will summarize the staff report to the extent necessary. Commission members may ask questions of staff, and the staff member may be cross-examined by the applicant and interested parties. Second is applicant to include their witness or witnesses have up to 15 minutes, and the commission may ask members of the applicant, and city staff and parties involved may cross-examine. Witnesses may be cross-examined but do not have the authority to cross-examine. Parties to include their witness or witnesses have up to 10 minutes for each party. The commission, again, can ask members of the parties, ask questions of the parties, rather. Cross-examination by staff and applicants. Witnesses may be cross-examined but, again, do not have the authority to cross-examine. And then interested persons have up to 5 minutes each. And again, the commission may ask them questions and cross-examination by staff, applicant, and parties. Interested persons may be cross-examined but do not have the authority to cross-examine. And then we will close the hearing to all testimony and discuss the issue amongst commission. And then make a decision and issue findings of fact and conclusions of law, move into closed session pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, continue the public hearing until a specified time, or take the matter under advisement and announce their recommendation at another specified time. Okay. So, we are going to move into the land use hearing part of this meeting. Is there a challenge to the jurisdiction of the City of Aztec Commissioners to hear any of the hearings on tonight's agenda? Hearing and seeing none. Are there any conflicts of interest or personal biases to be declared by a commission member?
No.
No. Hearing and seeing none. Number 3, have there been any ex parte contacts regarding the upcoming matters that a commission member needs to declare? No. Hearing and seeing none. Will staff, any applicants and parties identified by commission, all witnesses, and any interested persons wishing to testify regarding the zone change 19-02, please stand and raise your right hand. Okay, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth under penalty of perjury? Okay, please be seated. Thank you. Okay, first up is staff will summarize the staff report to the extent necessary to enable those present to understand the issues before the commissioners. Mr. Saavedra?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City
Good evening.
Commission. We're here before you for a request for a zone change. And this is labeled as 1902, a zone change on 507 White Avenue. And I'm going to dim the lights.
Okay.
The applicant is Myron Voorhees, and this is the subject property. Subject property is located in the R1 Single Family Zoning District, and the request comes before you to zone change it to the R2 Multiple Family Zoning District. This is the house right here at 507. And it needs to be noted there's actually two residential structures on this parcel of property. One of them, as you see here, was built in 1937, according to San Juan County's assessors. The other property, it was built in 1945, according to San Juan County assessors. Now, this structure right here is over 1,000 square feet, so I believe it is 1,080 square feet, and the secondary structure is 395 square feet. Now, the request again comes before you for the zone change, and in addition, a waiver to the square foot requirement in any of the R1 or R2 districts. There's a 600 square foot floor limit. This one, the one in the back is, again,
Smaller.
390
Yeah, it's about half.
feet.
Yeah.
But it needs to be noted, it was built in 1945,
Right.
well before these regulations were put in place. In addition, the setback requirements that are also to be waived. So to give you, again, an idea and a description of the property. Now, with any zone change, there is an analysis that takes place. It can't just be arbitrary. There has to be put through specific criteria to see if this is going to be detrimental to the neighborhood, if it fits within the comprehensive plan, if it is a spot zone, and so forth. Now, the subject property is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan calls for multifamily dwelling units. If this was a request to build a new apartment complex, it would fit in that. However, these structures have been remaining in place for over 70 years. And so it does meet the comprehensive plan. This is basically going to try to bring these two units, if they're going to be utilized as rentals, in compliance. Now, 70 years is a long time. It's been operating as a single-family dwelling parcel. The reality is, I think in this day and age, nobody knows who's related to who as we look at single-family dwelling structures. Code enforcement does not have the ability nor the appetite to check personal driver's license to ensure that somebody in the primary structure is related to the individual in the secondary structure. That is how single-family dwelling districts have been defined per zoning for the last century. The reality is, times have changed, Airbnbs are becoming more prolific. Second, residential dwelling units are prominent throughout Aztec, though they do not always meet the zoning criteria. So if the applicant at some point wants, and this was a recommendation by community development, to utilize both properties as rentals, though he may not be living on the parcel of property, it's best to zone change it to multiple family so that it is in compliance with the use and zoning district. So, let me go back really quick. So we also have to look at this. Will this use or request of a zone change cause adverse impacts? Now, anytime you have more individuals, more density, there is the potential for adverse impacts. Again, if this was not in existence and this was a new apartment complex going up, that could be a potential impact. However, it has been in existence for 70 years. It should be very minimal at this point. There hasn't been anything identified in the past that would indicate that this is going to be adverse to the surrounding area. We also have to look at compliance of use. Will this actual use or the request meet the definition of the use? And it will. If the individual does not live on the parcel of property and decides to rent it out, they would be in compliance with the zoning code. If they were not, however, at some point the applicant decides that I found another piece of property, I still own this parcel, I would want to rent it out, that is considered multiple family, and that would be a violation. So this would actually bring it into conformity. Also, we look at compatibility with surrounding properties. Now, this is not necessarily the case with this unit. There is a lot of single-family dwelling structures around this property, around 507 White. However, it needs to be noted that there is an apartment complex 86 feet away from 507 White, which is actually located on Aztec Boulevard. And it is actually right here. This is an apartment complex.
Mhm.
This is high density as opposed to these two structures right there. Now, the one big concern that we would have with all this is, of course, making sure that there's adequate access for this secondary dwelling unit should there ever be an emergency, and that will be a condition that I'll get into later on. So the one area where this application did not meet is it considered a spot zone? And a spot zone basically means is that this is R1, it's going to go to R2 if approved. Is there any R2 in the area that it abuts? It does not. So it does not meet that criteria, but that being said, it's still close enough, 86 feet, that, well, it doesn't meet it, but
Right.
there can be an argument for it. Again, this structure has been in place these two structures have been in place for the last 70 years. So this is to give you an idea of where it's at from a bird's eye view, surrounding properties. This is looking, if you're looking on Aztec Boulevard, this is the house right here. So the applicant came before community development, recently purchased this property on the open market and would like to fix it up and rehab it. It's currently in decent shape, however, it does need some work. This is just to give you an idea. These are not my pictures, these are actually from the previous listing when the house was on the market. So this is the primary dwelling structure. Now this is a secondary dwelling structure. This is the side view. This is the back view. This is inside the structure. Again, inside the structure. Kitchen area. This is a carport for the secondary, so there was some good planning. They thought about adding some shade and some protection for the vehicles. This is all for the secondary structure. As you can see, that probably needs to be removed at some point. This is surrounding properties at 507 White. So again, it's all single family. This is a double wide, and it's okay to have a double wide in a single family zoning district. It's just that becomes a question. And the units is actually there. This is just to the south. So that being said, Community Development does recommend approval with the conditions outlined in the staff report and presented here. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Any commissioners have any questions of Mr. Saavedra regarding this zone change request?
So this neighborhood, probably most of the homes were built in the 30s and 40s, the age of them.
They vary.
Yeah.
There's mobile homes, there's some site-built houses. The ages do vary, but
Yeah.
they're, by and large.
It's an older residential area though, right? Okay. Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
I have, so the secondary building on there looks like it's in a little rougher shape than the primary structure. But,
Yeah.
The back
Some spots.
needs some work, and that's actually kind of the reason why the applicant is bringing forward this application, is to not just to leave them in the current condition.
right,
And that's part of why that goes into our recommendation. It's not just to leave them as is.
Mhm.
It's actually to improve them so that not only the property will be improved, but the surrounding area will be improved if they're built to code and built to standard.
and,
So they will need some attention.
right. And is there any plan right now for because you talked about the parking access, that you'd have to visit with them about, because it says no alley, no parking in the alley, and about the trash cans and stuff like that. Have you already had a conversation with them about the parking and with the owner about the parking and
Yeah,
stuff?
It's been made
And how
aware.
to-
It's kind of just goes without saying is that it's an alley access, and so any alley cannot be obstructed by branches,
Okay.
trash cans, cars, or anything
Right.
like that. We just want to make sure that that's highlighted. There's adequate parking for the secondary dwelling structure. As seen with the carport.
With the carport,
and
right.
so forth. We
That's
just
what I
want
was
to make
wondering.
sure that if there is an emergency, that there's not going to be obstructions of any kind. So that's almost like a standard, just want to reinforce, making sure no trash cans, no
Mhm.
cars, no branches,
Mhm.
anything of that nature will obstruct any access.
Okay. And the primary structure, I can't remember the front of that one. There's room, they have room to not
Primary-
park on the street and to park up in the driveway
Primary
and stuff.
structure does
Yeah,
have
I
enough
see that
for
now.
2
Okay.
cars. That does meet both the criteria and definition for single family and
Mhm.
multiple family.
I just wanted to make sure. I thought I saw that, but I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
on the front.
Actually, as you can see, by and large, now I understand that it's vacant right now, so you can't really see. Now, parking on the street is what is considered spillover parking, but you were allowed to park on the street,
Right.
but
Right.
that's not the primary
Primary, right.
designation. It's more of a spillover.
And a lot of those streets are so narrow that when they do get parking on there, it makes it hard.
Correct.
But the structure's been there for years and years and years. So, it's not like they're asking for anything other than the zoning in order to be
It's
able
just
to.
You're exactly right. It's just the zoning to making sure that the use is compatible with the
Mhm.
land use regulations.
With the land use.
The other thing that wasn't highlighted, it was highlighted in the staff report, is that the applicant did have the opportunity to submit a conditional use for an accessory dwelling structure. Now, again, that's more of a mother-in-law quarters, that meets more of the definition if it's a single-family structure and you have your mother-in-law living there.
Mhm.
It fits into that box of same family. But again, that
With
is
them not
very
living there.
difficult to enforce, if not impossible, because nobody's checking IDs. If it's your cousin, we don't have, unfortunately, the time nor the appetite to do
Mhm.
that. So this kind of just brings it all into conformity should the use in the future change.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, it sounds like he's being honest and just wants to turn it into 2 renters, you know?
Mhm.
Yes, yes.
So,
And
makes
that's
sense.
exactly, it, just being straightforward, honest, upfront, and rehabbing a piece of property that's in decent shape, but if it can be improved, that would be a benefit not only
Yep.
to the parcel, but to the rest of the neighborhood. And again, that's why in part, we're recommending for the
Okay.
Thank
The
you.
rehab, that's one of the findings of facts, is the rehab and,
Mhm.
yeah. Good job.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody else have any other comments or questions for Mr. Saavedra before we let him go? Does the applicant or any interested parties want to cross-examine Mr. Saavedra at this time? Okay, all right, thank you, sir. I'm sorry?
The applicant, Myron, is here, so if he does
Yeah,
want to talk
I was gonna
about
say,
it, he can.
Second is our applicant to include their witnesses. You have up to 15 minutes, sir. Okay. Is there anything you want to add or testify to if you?
I don't have anything to add. If you guys have any questions, I'd be willing to answer them.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind coming up real quick, please. Or I think is this one on, Ed?
That
Okay.
should be on.
Good evening, sir. Myron, right?
Yes,
Voorhees?
yes.
Okay. Hey, so I'm just gonna assume that your plan is to rehab these and potentially in the future rent them out.
Yes, that's the
And
plan.
you're just trying to get up to code, so you're not kinda, so there, nobody can really question what's going on and say, hey, what are you doing back there? It's not within zoning, et cetera, so you can just move forward. And if it turns into a rental situation, that's fine. If not, then, you know,
Well, and even a resale situation, nobody can get financing on this the way it is. I actually tried to buy a property on Church Street that was the same situation, and I couldn't get conventional financing on it. So that's another problem. The property's stuck without this, so it also helps the resale value also, or resaleability. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits. I mean,
okay.
just bringing it into compliance, nothing shady, just,
Right.
I just want to make it compliant, you know?
Okay. Does anybody have any questions,
It's pretty straightforward.
comments of Mr. Voorhees?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Let's see. Any staff or parties, interested parties wish to cross-examine Mr. Voorhees on this? Yes, sir, Mr. Saavedra.
And I apologize, I failed to mention that, where he's correct. Lending has gotten stricter after 2007. And what banks are doing now is checking with zoning to make sure that the house is compliant with not only with zoning, but also with building permits and so forth. What has happened with structures like this, since they've been built 70 years ago, there wasn't a permit on file.
Right.
So when a traditional lending company calls my office and says, hey, do you have a special use permit?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, I was a little curious about what you meant by saying you couldn't qualify for conventional financing.
And that's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah, I
That's
got
exactly
red
correct.
flag.
Because there's no
Crazy.
permits about that, and they're like, what is this thing here? You know, if there's no
Exactly.
permit, it shouldn't be there, basically, and may not meet code, so we're not gonna finance you. Am I getting that close anyway?
Yep.
Okay,
That's exactly it.
okay.
So
All right.
what this
Well, that
does is
answers- thank
bring
you
it
for
in
clarifying that.
compliance so that at any point in the future, if the bank does call, especially an appraiser, and that's usually where
Right.
this comes up.
Right,
Because
right.
the appraiser will look for certain things. And if there's no permit on file, there's no zone change on file, anything of that nature, it gets flagged. Myron is exactly right.
Or you'd have to
It
demolish
basically
it
puts the
potentially and-
property in limbo.
Right,
So-
I understand now. Thank you for clarifying that. Anybody else have any staff or interested parties want to talk to Mr. Voorhees before we dismiss him back to his seat? Hearing none, thank you, sir. Next are any parties. We have a couple of folks. Let's see, to include any witnesses, I don't know if they would be considered parties, probably interested persons are the other two folks. So I'm going to go ahead and skip parties and go to interested persons, which I believe are kind of neighbors in proximity to this property. So we'll start at the top. Is that Miss Rainey, Carolyn Rainey? Did I pronounce that right? Yes.
You just have an eye, please.
Good evening.
Good evening. I own and live in the property just adjacently south.
Okay.
At 503 and 505 are the actual street addresses. This property has been in my family, where I live, since the 1930s. Came down through my grandfather and my father to me. The property in question is definitely in a sad state of repair and has been for a number of years. My concern, I like the idea that it's going to be improved, but my concern is if with the zoning change, does this set a precedence for any other piece of property in the neighborhood that might, they decide to take, 3 houses down, they might decide, oh, well, they got a, multifamily. We can do the same thing with ours. I don't want to see that in my neighborhood. I realize there are apartments at the end of the alley that front San Juan Boulevard. They are not the best people. There's a lot of fighting, it spills over into the alley, and sometimes it comes as far south as my house. The access to the secondary structure is only through the alley. I don't particularly have a problem with that. I might have to put up some new fencing, but, just for my own peace of mind. But my concern is the fact, I don't want to see this be a precedence for the neighborhood.
I understand what you're saying.
That's really all I have to
Okay.
say. I'm not really in favor.
I understand.
I will say
Right. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Rainey.
Thank you.
Is there anybody, any commissioners that would like to ask any questions of Ms. Rainey? Are there any staff?
Just a comment.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Maybe just a comment that, since this did have the 2 structures already on it, I can understand your concern, but we take everything on a case-by-case basis. So if somebody was wanting to come in and add a structure, then the guidelines would be different, I would assume.
Yeah, it would have to meet current zoning.
Because it would have to meet
Yeah,
current zoning.
Right.
Rather than this structure already being there for so many
So I think what
years.
she might be saying is,
Just
let's say every house on that street has like a little casita or a guest house in there. Some of them may be habitable, some of them may not be, and everybody's like, oh, well, I want to do this zone change too, because I want to rent this out, and I want to rent the house and the back thing out, kind of thing. And then it could, and to be quite honest with you, I might part a little bit with what you're saying, because I think that's kind of the way we're heading, honestly, where folks are going to start using their casitas or their mother-in-law quarters, whatever you want to call them, their guest houses, as potential kind of supplemental income kind of thing. And, with the rise of Airbnb or VRBO or whatever, the millions of apps that are out there for that kind of stuff, I feel like that's, it's inevitable. It may not always be popular with a lot of people, and that's going to open up another can of worms down the road that we may need to revisit our zoning for that, broader fashion. But for now, we're taking it case by case as it comes.
And any new structure would have to meet would have to meet the current square footage and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, by right, another apartment complex could not go forward in this neighborhood without coming before the city commission. Now, it is correct in this one instance that the spot zoning could further allow, I wouldn't say precedent, but further allow for another complex in the future. Now, again, there's a criteria that has to be listed. So I also think it needs to be important. I know there is some concern with multiple family apartment complexes and so forth. There is some concern, there's also a stigma associated with that. And I think that needs to be separated, because just because you have 2 families living together as rentals does not necessarily mean that they're going to be bad individuals. I just need to state that. But when you start increasing high density, however,
Yeah.
that potential
It's just numbers, it's odds, yeah.
There is, that is correct. But if you had to look at the aerial photo, there's not a lot of properties like this with a secondary dwelling unit. So for that to happen in the future is not likely. Now, could there be in the future a developer buys these 3 parcels and knocks down the residential units and puts up an apartment complex? Sure, that is possible. It doesn't set the precedent.
Right.
But it is possible that could happen, just like anywhere else in Aztec. They would have to meet the requirements. If they don't, they would be coming before the city commission
Yeah.
asking for approval
And I see what she's saying, because it might just, somebody might be like, oh, well, they did it here, so I want to do it too. It may not technically be a precedent setter, but it may inspire somebody to say, hey, that's a great idea. I'm going to rehab this old guest house in my backyard and do that. So I get your point. We just have to,
The spot
Be
dome,
vigilant, I
yes,
guess.
is a big concern.
Yeah.
But outside of that, looking at the criteria, looking at the density, looking at access is the hugest one. And so that's probably, if it was, let's just say, right here. This is all hypothetical. Somebody wants to buy this piece of property and put a large apartment complex. That's not gonna go too well, because access becomes a huge issue when you have apartment complexes.
Right.
You start looking at the fire code, fire suppression, and fire hydrants, and access for a fire truck that does not meet it. So this is, again, just hypothetical. With current conditions right now, that would not happen in this area, or that would not be a recommendation from community development. Unless, these were all bought up. But then you're talking about a master plan.
yeah,
a
that's
whole
another
change of the
conversation
neighborhood.
altogether.
So-
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
The two houses at the north end of the street are actually already R2. Those are two residences at the north end of the street. So it's not new for this street, the two at the north end. And as far as finding, worried about tenants being low quality, I've been using, well, I have one more rental and it's over my shop in my house. So I use a pretty rigorous process. Turbo Tenant does all the screening, background checks. Nobody can get in without getting a background check and credit report, so.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
So where exactly were the other R2 units in relation?
605 and 608.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Rainey. I don't think anybody has any other questions or comments for Mrs. Rainey? No? All right. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it. Our next interested person is Mr. Michael Padilla. Good evening, sir. You have about up to 5 minutes.
Yes, I live across the street
Did
in
he get notice?
506 White
Because if he
Avenue.
got notice, then he's a party.
What?
Did you get a notice then?
Both of them did, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So just so
Well,
you know,
then
you
I
have
should
10
have,
minutes.
okay. You have 10 minutes. I apologize.
I got a certified
Okay.
mail.
Thank
Thank you. I'm familiar with that property. I lived in the mother-in-law house back in 1980,
Something.
but I grew up in the neighborhood too, and I'm familiar with both homes. These homes are part of the Spath Edition and part of the oldest homes in Aztec. If you look in the Aztec booklet and you see the railroad, one of those pictures was taken near the area where these homes were eventually built. Prior to Myron buying this home, or this property, it was owned by W.C. And W.C. was a Vietnam veteran, and he was fixing up both places. He was living in the mother-in-law house and working on a front house when he passed away. It was his vision for this to come to fruition. And I'm here in support of him.
Okay.
The only question I have, will this raise anybody in the neighborhood's taxes? If it doesn't, then it's a no-brainer. It's going to beautify our neighborhood. He's working hard on the property, and I think we should move forward with it and grant him the R2.
All right, sir.
The other two properties, before I get off, 602 is right near the Agapita Gomez home. And it's been separated into two, a front and a rear. The other one on the corner, 608, there's a home in the front, and then there's that little white house on the side off of Pinon. That's what makes that multi-dwelling. Other than that, there hasn't been any changes in this neighborhood since before I was born. And that would have been in the 50s. But it is a part of the neighborhood, and it can be an essential part of the neighborhood if this is granted.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does anybody have any cross-examination, either the applicant or staff, of Mr. Padilla? Hearing none. I will now close the hearing to testimony, and we will discuss amongst ourselves. So, anybody have any issues or comments or concerns regarding this, or just something they want to bring up?
Covered it pretty good.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just,
All good.
I think with the remodeling and so forth, it's
Yeah.
gonna save a couple of units that otherwise could be
Right.
lost. And as Mr. Padilla pointed out, it can improve the entire neighborhood anytime. I live in one of those 1946 houses, and I've got a nice little place there that's been remodeled over the years, so I know what the possibilities
Yeah,
are.
yeah,
And,
likewise.
So,
I think if it improves the neighborhood as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Uh,
anything I think is
And
wonderful. If
while
somebody
I
wants to come
understand
in and-
the concern about setting a precedent, when I was looking over the map, I don't see a lot of potential unless somebody actually comes before us and said, we're gonna change everything.
Right.
So I don't think,
And then
I
the
really
burden-
don't think it's gonna affect you
And the
too
burden
much.
falls on us to.
And then would fall on us
To
to
make
say
that
yea,
decision.
nay, or maybe if it does,
we
if
go
they
through
did
this
come
again.
to us, so.
Okay. Is everybody comfortable here? Okay. So I would like to entertain a motion for,
Do you want to close the testimony first? Close the discussion.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, we're going to close, I'm going to go ahead and close to all testimony, and our discussion is now closed. And now I will entertain a motion for quasi judicial hearing item B.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to move to approve the zone change 19-02 request from Myron
Voorhees.
Voorhees
Yeah.
for a zone change from the R1 Single Family District to the R2 Multiple Family District with waivers to the square foot requirement and rear yard setback for the secondary structure for property located, excuse me, at 507 White Avenue with the following, with the findings of facts 1 through 3. Does that, I think that covers it.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Carla, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Schilber,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fry,
aye.
Commissioner Sight,
Aye.
Commissioner Lewis,
Aye.
Commissioner Randall,
Aye.
motion passes 5-0.
Okay. Thank you, folks. We are ready to move on to Commissioner, City Manager, and Department Head reports. And we'll just, who's ready? Commissioner Lewis, we'll start with you, sir.
We had a great July 4th, I think. Great parades going on. It was a lot of fun to get out in the community again. It was nice and warm. Aside from that, not very many meetings recently, so that made it kind of nice too. So,
Okay.
no other reports.
Commissioner Randall?
No report.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, I appreciated the opportunity to go to the Gold Star Families banquet and participate in honoring our veterans. So thank you for making those arrangements. Also, I've received a notice that Force Ed is going to have a membership drive. That's Four Corners Economic Development Group on July 17th at 8:30. It will be at the San Juan College Quality Center. And encourage any of the other commissioners to go if they can. And they're revamping plans for economic development in the area, and it would be important for us
Could
to.
you pass that on to me,
to hear
please, so I
that.
can take a look at it?
I'll forward it to you.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right,
very
thank you.
good. And that's all.
Okay. City Manager?
I do, I've got a couple of things, Mr. Mayor. First off, the annual Employees Association picnic is coming up Thursday at noon. City offices will be closing that day at noon, so we can appreciate all of our employees. It has been relocated from Riverside Park to Capwalls Park because of some of the issues we had with the groundwater down there,
Right.
the playground and stuff.
Okay.
So that's Thursday at noon. I've got the New Mexico Municipal League Resolutions Committee meeting coming up July 20th in Albuquerque, which I'll be attending, which is a Saturday. Also going to be at the membership meeting with Commissioner Fry. Carlos forwarded everybody an email today about the voting delegates for the New Mexico Municipal League that is coming up in August. So that will be on next commission meeting's agenda to declare the delegate and the alternate. So something to think about. And then everybody should have also received an invitation from the Connie Mack World Series for all county, all city night, which is Wednesday,
23rd,
July 31st, Wednesday evening. And if you plan on attending, they'd appreciate a heads up so they can get you announced on over the loudspeaker in between the two games. A great night, great event, Connie Mack World Series, fun to attend. I made my confirmation today. I'll be there and hope to see the rest of you guys there as well.
Okay.
And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Ms. Hunsaker?
I don't have a report.
Okay. I will keep it brief. I too wanted to thank the,
Oh, they're pointing, because you
I'm sorry?
skipped me.
I did?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Commissioner Sipe.
That's
could've
all
swore
right.
I-
No, it's
I'm
fine.
sorry.
You usually start over here. You
Yeah,
started at the
maybe
other
that's why I
end.
need to stay
That's
to
okay.
the
That's
order
all
that I
right.
normally do.
Yeah.
My apologies.
No, you're fine. I just wanted to echo what Mayor Pro Tem said about the Gold Star banquet. It was a great opportunity to go and just what little bit I got to listen to
Woody Williams.
Woody Williams. Yes, thank you. That was I would like to have been able to hear more of his testimonies and his views. But anyway, it was a great turnout. I hope that they made a lot of money that night, but it was fun. So not really much else. That's about it. Thank you.
Sorry.
You're fine.
Quickly, I want to kind of add to that. I want to give let's see, Mark's birthday, we'll have another meeting. So an early birthday wish to Commissioner Sipe for next week.
Thank you.
We won't have a meeting until after her birthday. And I'm going to try and do better about announcing birthdays, during the pertinent meetings, through the month to recognize folks. It's always nice when somebody recognizes your special birthday. So I had a great time at the dinner. I want to thank the city for the table and for inviting us and for going. I have a little bit of a connection to Woody Williams. It's kind of vague and a few layers of gray in between, but in 1995, because he's from West Virginia, proud West Virginian from the Fairmont area up in the northern half of the state. I was assigned to recruiting duty with the U.S. Navy in Charleston, West Virginia in 1995, and they unveiled the War Memorial there. And it just so happened that the statue that was finished, they had all the names up, but they didn't have all the different statues, finished to be presented yet. But it just so happened the first one they finished was the sailor. And that was the backdrop for the day. And Woody Williams was there, and the governor at the time was there. And I was a new recruiter there. I was 25 years old, and I, at the time, thought I was getting stuck with a crappy detail because it was bitter cold, like one of those really crappy fall raw days. It was pouring the rain, and I was the new guy, so I had to be on the color guard and hold the Navy flag behind the governor. And I was there at that dedication as part of the color guard that Woody Williams was there. So I told him that story, and he thought it was kind of cool, and it just kind of, now that I'm older, I appreciate having to go through some of that stuff for the story that I have to tell now. And yeah, it was just exciting. I mean, the guy's a living legend, regardless of where he's from. He just happens to be from West Virginia, but he's a living legend. And I also want to, Mr. Thomas Begay, the Navajo code talker that was there as well. It was just a real treat to be amongst them and to shake their hands and get a picture with them and some of their stories that I'm sure we could sit up all night, drinking whiskey and listening to war stories. So it was just kind of cool event, and I was grateful to be able to be part of it. 4th of July went off pretty well. I didn't hear of any issues with anybody blowing their hands off or anything like that with fireworks or anybody getting in trouble. So, but before you know it, we're going to be back at school. So enjoy the rest of your summer, and thank you for everything that you guys do and for your participation in the meeting tonight. And with that said, I would like to turn it over to our department heads for any reports they may have.
I just have to remind everybody.
National Night Out.
National Night Out.
1 week from today.
Yep.
We're very excited. We went and picked up 16 bicycles today, so we'll have those. We've been handing out flyers. We've had lots of hits on our Facebook. We just invite the whole community to come out. It's going to be a great evening, and the bikes are more for the little kids. We didn't get any big ones, so hopefully they'll come and enjoy the evening with us. And I've had lots of people already want to know if we're going to do the donut eating contest. Of course, what would it be without the world-famous donut eating contest? So,
What's-
please come.
What's normally the winning number for donuts? I'm gonna decide whether or not I'm gonna
Well,
throw my
what we
hat in
do
there.
is we give them, depending on how many we have, if we
dozen?
have too many,
Oh,
we see who can eat the 3 or 4 or 5 or how many. It used to be 6.
so it's a set
It's
amount and
down-
then it's a timer
Last
then.
year, I believe it was 4.
Oh.
Some years it's been 3.
I got this.
But we
What's the
have
win?
40
What's the prize?
dozen ordered, so we should have plenty for everybody to come and
There's a bunch
eat
last
up,
year.
so.
What do I get when I win?
A T-shirt that says, "I ate more donuts than an Aztec."
It's an
cow."
extra size, so,
So I'm gonna eat real slow so everybody can get a T-shirt.
all right.
Please come.
Awesome. Thanks, Chief.
It's a great time.
I actually have a report.
Oh,
We
is this
could
your first ever?
We could possibly have to have a special meeting next week. We're supposed to pass a resolution, the new election stuff. They've changed the calendar where the county commission has to approve where our polling places are gonna be for the new, elections in March. I have a message in to Tanya to see if we have to have a special meeting tomorrow, because it's supposed to be done now in July. So if she says yes, we could potentially have a special meeting next week.
Next week, okay.
She's waiting to hear from her tomorrow.
Okay, oh, I see, okay. So you'll get word to us as quick as possible? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Not next Tuesday.
Yeah, not next Tuesday, because we don't want to miss the National Night Out.
Right.
So, okay. Anybody else? Any other department head reports? Okay. That's it. I'll move to adjourn. Thank you.
Steve, want us to leave these? All right.